Hey everyone, good afternoon. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. It's Monday, which means it is Broker Compliance Series, and today we're covering buyer contingency removals, requests for repairs, and other seller disclosures. So we're going to hop right into it here and start out with the buyer contingency removal. If you haven't been on one of my classes before, welcome. I go over most of the just the basics of compliance and how to have the form filled out correctly. And then I also add in some pertinent information and some background, but it is really up to how you determine to do your business or how your coach, take all the information you need and it's up to you to determine your style. So this is more of just a how to fill out the forms, compliance, and answer any questions. Cameras on are fantastic. I like to get some participation, so feel free to anytime during the class, if you have a question, feel free to just raise your hand or take yourself off mute and participate. Love participation. It always helps with the class and the flow class because if you have a question or if you have a certain situation or a scenario with a buyer or seller, it's really helpful to others and maybe somebody else has the same question. So feel free to pop in at any time. All right, go ahead and get started. Can everyone see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Perfect. All right. Buyer contingency removals. This is we're kind of hopping on like right in the middle of a transaction. You're in contract and you have represent the buyer and you're now ready to remove all contingencies. Assuming that we have in place our the basic contingencies. So loan, appraisal, inspections. So those are the big items there. There's all of these other additional inspection or contingency elements here that we'll get to in just a minute. But we'll go ahead and which one is it? I always like to use either properties I have listed or properties I have in contract. Okay, so name of seller, um, Mr. Seller, and let's say there's one buyer. So Miss Buyer. All right. Okay, so this is the here you would mark it's the request for repair, or if it's a response and reply to a request for repair. So if we'll get to that in just a minute because we are going to kind of attach that to a request for repair. If it's attached to it, if it's not attached to a request for repair, that is not marked. So what this means is if your buyer is saying, yes, we're removing all contingencies contingent on seller agreeing to the repairs that are on the attached request for repair. So that's what that marking that means. Okay, so if it's just a plain contingency removal, nothing's marked there. If they're moving forward without a request, then it's unmarked. If this was a response and reply to a request for repair, then it would be marked there as well. Okay, so then you would go to when the original contract was dated. What's the date today? So let's go back. We'll go back 2 weeks. All right. Contracts dated 2/9, property address, buyer, seller's information there as well. Now, if you are removing all contingencies, it's real simple. If buyer's ready to go, so the loan is fully approved, you've chatted with the lender, you've had that call, and the lender says, yes, they're good to go. We're good. Okay. Appraisals in at value, no conditions. Great. We're good to go. If everything else, all their investigations have been completed as well, then you would mark here buyer removes any and all buyer contingencies. So that means that the buyer's no longer, they don't have any further investigation of the property. Everything is done. We're just waiting on pending closing. Okay, that's the easy one. You can send in kind of piecemeal, I call it. So you can send in piece by piece. If you have, say, the loan is completed and appraisals completed, um, say insurance, but maybe you haven't reviewed, the seller disclosures, right? If there's other thing, you can mark certain individual items here. So it says buyer removes only the following individually checked buyer contingencies. So you would mark through some of these, but say if you haven't reviewed the seller disclosures, the seller hasn't provided the TDS, then you don't want to remove that contingency. So you can leave those unmarked. If there are other things, if the HOA docs aren't in, leave that unmarked. Don't remove contingencies of things that you haven't fully reviewed on your buyer's behalf. Because what happens is if you mark box number 4, you agree to everything. If you don't have the TDS and something comes up on the TDS, like there's a seasonal stream that was discovered in the back, right? That's a true story, right? I have one of our agents that happened to them. Their seasonal stream was discovered and it was listed on the TDS after the fact. Well, if you remove all contingencies, then that's saying we remove all of the contingencies, right? And we reviewed it. So that's what the buyer is saying. You don't want to do that if you haven't truly reviewed every single thing on this list. So that is really making sure that everything is good to go. But again, like I said, you can remove, if you write on your residential purchase agreement in the offer that, okay, we have say we have a fully underwritten loan, we're going to do a 10-day loan contingency. At day 10, you can remove the loan contingency, but that's it. So that's the only contingency you would be removing. Or say you have a, appraisal, 10-day appraisal, loan and appraisal, and you leave everything else blank. Okay. So, and then when you're completed, if you have say a 17-day contingency for everything else, then you would send this at day 17. So, overall, you can, depending on your dates of contingencies that match up with your original offer is when these are due. If they're all, textbook, just the template, 17 days, day 17, you mark that as everything's good and you move it forward. Okay. Any questions on this so far? All right. Now we're going to go at a different point of view. There are ways that you can send in or accept a non-contingent offer. Okay. So I don't recommend it. Don't do this. Okay. Don't, and you've heard it and you can say you've heard the broker said, don't write non-contingent offers. Okay. Just don't do it. Because this is telling the buyer. And then I'll go from that perspective of the buyer, and then I'll give you a little caveat from the seller's perspective as well, and what you do when you accept non-contingent offers on the seller side. So what you're saying is that if you remove contingencies, there is a box in the RPA that you're hereby removing all contingencies. It's not contingent. We saw a lot of this in 2020, 2021, when the market was crazy and there were multiple offers. People were, out, there were tons of bidding wars. And so to make the offer stronger, buyers were saying, we're writing it non-contingent. This means that we don't care if the appraisal comes in or not. We'll pay cash over whatever price. And they did. So that was the temperature of the market at the time. And this is just a way to be a little bit more aggressive. However, don't write it in. I don't recommend it because you're saying, yes, we're waiving everything. If something comes up later on, then you're really giving your buyer, there's no way out, essentially. So what this is saying you waive all contingencies up front. Now, if you have a listing and you're the listing agent and you receive a non-contingent offer, be sure to upfront provide all the seller disclosures, because there is that caveat with the transfer disclosure statement that says that is the one loophole is the TDS. And the TDS is the primary document. However, there's other attached supplemental documents that go with the TDS. So you'll see on disclosures, it says this is a TDS. This is a TDS required disclosure. So make sure that they send in the TDS, because then they can't use that as a loophole as well. Because if you accept an offer and say, yeah, we're closing in 10 days, it's all cash, it's non-contingent, but really that buyer's maybe a savvy investor and they do want to do some investigations and they're maybe using it just to kind of lock in the property. And then want to use that loophole, be sure that you cover your bases with that and also advise your seller that, hey, it's contingent, but we have to provide these things because that is the one loophole with that TDS and all of the disclosures that go with the TDS in addition to that. So just be sure when you are contingencies, the non-contingent offer, I'm not really seeing a lot of these. Danny, are you seeing any of these or anyone wanting to do these?
No, I did have an agent try to, on an FHA, waive an appraisal contingency, um, but it was an FHA. So that's about the most that I have seen where people are waiving them. Right now, it's buyers.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're not seeing a lot of this now, guys. Like I said, the market is just different. This was really popular a few years ago, and we had ran into a lot of issues with this, especially with the VA and FHA. We're waiving all contingencies. Okay, you can't. So, but just be aware of that. Something to be aware of. All right. So contingencies. Let's go back here. Contingency removal. Let me see if there's anything I skipped here. Um, okay. Now we'll go into request for repairs. Like I mentioned up here, if it was attached, then you would mark that. So let's say it is. So say we're our buyer, we have the buyer, and we're going to remove contingencies based on this request for repairs down here. So we're going to draft this baby up, and again in the corner, date prepared. These dates are they're in, they are important. Sometimes the dates get wrong. It's really important. Always think of it like this. If it has to go in front of, arbitration or a mediator or a judge, you have to be able to explain the discrepancies. And so just be sure that everything is in order. Make sure that the dates are all correct. All the dates are added in. I've seen it before where they're fighting over the date because the date was not added in there. And they say, well, this is the date it was signed. Well, we don't know the date that it was prepared. And so there's issues with that at times. So just be sure dates are in, the correct number is up here. And we said that it was, what date did we say? Let me make sure since we're being compliant. Oh, the 9th. All right. February 9th. Got it. Okay. All right. Date, request for repairs number, date prepared, the contract dated. What was the date of the contract? Property address, buyer name, seller name. Okay. So our buyer, we can say that they request seller to provide. Okay. Let's do this. What I like to do is I get the home inspection or the pest inspection. If I have the home inspection, I like to send the request for repairs with a copy of the home inspection, and I like to line item out. So let's say G dash one. It'll look like something like that in the home inspection. Kitchen. Um, Seller to repair or replace garbage disposal. Okay. You can add whatever verbiage. You could say seller, if your buyer wants a seller to replace the broken garbage disposal, you can have that as well. Spell check here. But it'll look something like this. I like to do that so it's very clear so that when they're reviewing it with the seller, they can say, okay, here's G1. Oh, okay, great. Yep. Here's a picture of the garbage disposal. Here it's not working. Yes, we know that it's not working condition. Okay. So I don't like them to have to go hunt for it. It makes it a lot easier. And I like to go through it. When I go over my inspections with the buyer, I kind of like to line item out or note things that that they are concerned about. Some might not care about a garbage disposal, but if they're like, oh gosh, I need one, or I need the dishwasher in working condition, whatever it is, I like to note that with the buyer, and then we can add it on to the request for repairs. We can add on additional things. So say there's let's see, K or living room, seller to fix broken window. Okay. So it can be something as simple as that. So then I So say that that's it. It's a broken window, garbage disposal that they want to get fixed. But say there's some section one work that wants to be that they want to have fixed. So let's say dated that day, repaired. Okay, so this would be buyer requests seller to have section one work completed as specified, the report dated or prepared by All Star Pest. Okay, so that's for section one. If we want section two, we would again do the same thing. Does anyone know or does anyone want to share or feel like sharing what the difference between section one and section two pest are? Okay. Section one is active infestation or act or something that is of immediate concern, such as dry rot, or there's subterranean or dry wood termites. So those are the immediate items. So there's either tons of dry rot, right, which are going to be called out. The reason that dry rot is an issue is because termites like that soft wood. So they will, it's a potential for termites because if they can get into that, then they're gonna have a feast, right, on that wood. And then we have a bigger issue, which is the termite, the actual active infestation. So VA requires that there's section one clearance, that there's no outstanding section one items. Section two are things of concern that are noted on the pest report, but they're not traditionally required by lenders, right? So the VA and most people just ask for section one because those are the immediate items and the immediate issues that are either active infestation or active dry rot that are going to be in the foreseeable future an issue with termites. So that's why the distinction between section one and section two is important. Okay. So we have our items here from our home inspection, and we have section one. So we're asking for section one clearance here. And then, maybe there's a carpet that's like, it needs to be replaced and it's, stained. Maybe they had a dog or something. And it's like, we kind of want a carpet credit or whatever the credit may be. Buyer request, seller credit buyer. So you can ask for an additional amount if you choose, or you can just have any of these items. But if you want to ask for an additional amount, you would put that there. Or you can just ask, if you want to just ask for a credit, that would be the line item here where you would just simply ask for a credit. If you want a credit for all the work, all these, garbage disposal, window, carpet, they're all maybe cosmetic things, and your buyer has a relative or they themselves are a handyman or whatever, just want a credit for some of those items, you would mark that here. So you can put, say $3,000 and they don't have to do, they're not going to fix any of that. We're just going to do a credit. That's the easiest way. That's the easiest. The easiest way is just throw some money at the problem because then we don't have to worry about checking to see if these things were fixed. That's the easiest way. However, your buyer might want to not have to deal with it and say, look, I just want a working garbage disposal. That's it. I want it. I want the broken window fixed, the garbage disposal. I don't want a credit. I don't have to worry about it. I would probably be one of those buyers, like I don't want to have to, don't make me think about it after. Like, let me just move on in. So depending on your buyer, that request can look different. And then attached reports. Here you want to, oops. Home inspection. And then if there was let's see, there's a termite. Say there was let's add some more in actually, now that we're at it. Okay. Okay. So say there's some appraisal items that get called out. So it's an FHA, and maybe they say that appraisal is appraised at value with the following conditions. So you can request that the seller make those repairs based on the appraisal right here. So I'll attach everything that is pertinent to help the seller make an informed decision, and I provide everything. Some agents don't do that. It's a matter of preference. I think, I've heard it said, the mindset of like, I'm not sharing all the inspections because if you move forward with another buyer, you're just going to use all of our inspections and give it to another buyer and they don't have to do the inspections. Well, I mean, yeah, there's some merit to that and I guess some truth. And so just like I said, it's a matter of preference. I provide everything. You don't have to. You can say, we want to credit because there's all these repairs here. You're not really required to provide it to the seller, but I always do. Again, if you're like, nope, I'm not giving them to the seller because I don't want them to go give it to the next buyer and then them buy and my buyer's out all this thousands of dollars of reports that they're really theirs. Okay, I get it. Like, but I provide it. So you don't have to, but I do. So if there were some appraisal items called out, you can attach the appraisal, or people do just that section at the bottom. I see it all the time, at value as is. That's fine as well. Or, you know, uh, property appraised at, and you have that little clip at the bottom of the appraisal and it'll say condition on, fixing a step, right? I've seen that. Or having the water heater double strapped, right? Maybe there's one brace or it's not elevated. So those are some items that get called out. So you can add in anything here and attach those when you send it. Here you can say if it's an FHA or a VA buyer, the lender requires the following items to be repaired. Okay, so again, this goes back to the appraisal. If there was something called out there, you can add it in here as well. So sometimes I will, just for clarification purposes, when I have a VA buyer and section 1 needs to be done, there's some dry rot or active infestation and some outstanding section 1 items. I'll put it twice just because I'm reiterating, hey, this is a lender required repair. You knew going into this, accepting a VA offer, that this is one of the requirements. And so this is something not only that we're asking for, our lender needs it. Like it's a requirement. And when you accepted the offer, you agreed to that. So I'll put that there as well. Or if the buyer requests seller pay for the following costs or expenses required, put it here as well. The easiest way to do it is if you have your buyer, and I'm dealing with this right now with one of our agents, if the buyer, and it's not our buyer, thank God, but if a buyer pays to have these items completed before, and here's exactly what happened. This is an issue today. So our agent, we have the listing, the buyer paid for termite work to get done, and now they can't close. So they're canceling. Well, the seller benefits now from that amount because I had her write in a clause, right, that it's non-refundable, that the buyer's making these adjustments and these modifications to the seller's property at their own cost and their, at their own, at their own risk, essentially. And lo and behold, they're canceling, they can't move forward. So really when you have the buyer and you have your buyer pay for things on a property that they don't own, it can get a little tricky because now they're out the money and the seller benefits from having section 1 clearance, and it's at no fault to the seller, and seller retains deposit because contingencies were removed. So it gets a little tricky. So if you can avoid putting your buyer at risk, do that. Don't have, think of it like, would you put yourself in that position? Would you pay money to improve on a property or anything, a car, right? Would you put new tires on a car that you're buying that you don't own yet, that you're still getting a loan for? Would you do that? Okay, so it's not always wise to, to have our clients to do that. So I've never done it. I've never done it. I never will do that. I absolutely won't do it because the risk is not worth it. It's just there's other ways to negotiate. There's different ways to do it. Some people are different. Obviously the transaction that we have here is, the seller, the buyer's agent advisor client that way. So don't do it. It's not a great practice because then in this scenario, how do you think the buyer feels about her agent having her put money into a property that she now can't qualify for. So, it just, it's not great. Not great to have money out on something that you don't own. So just don't do it at all if you can avoid it. Okay. Which is why, again, this would go to this buyer request, seller pay for the cost, and then, okay. Here, if the seller agrees to all buyer's requests or some buyer requests and the buyer accepts seller's partial agreement below, buyer removes investigation of property contingency, and it would be except if there were any, or buyer removes contingencies identified in the attached, sign contingency removal based on this request for repairs. If the seller agrees to the request for repairs, then the buyer removes contingencies. So I like to see it attached as a listing agent, and I like to attach it like, hey, if you perform all of these as requested, right? So say we want a roof inspection, or we want the roof cert done, a 2-year roof cert, we want all the work done, we want all the items from the home inspection, we want section 1. Oh, and there's an appraisal item, which right now buyers are starting to have the upper hand. These requests for repairs are not there. We're seeing the longer the request for repairs from the buyers, the market has shifted. It's no longer oh, non-contingent, please, like, let us, the house, what, 50,000 over? No problem. We're just desperate to get in and get locked in. Now it's like, wait a minute. There's a stain in the carpet and we want that fixed. Actually, let's cancel. Let's go look at some more houses because there's one down the street that has a bigger closet. That's the temperature of the market right now. It is not the way it was. So these requests for repairs, they're getting a lot longer on the listings, and on the buyer side, buyers are a lot more picky, and as they should be. That's what the market dictates. It's supply and demand. There's less buyers and there's more inventory, and buyers are more picky because they're looking at a high interest rate. It is not like, hey, let's get in and the market's great. It's like, this is probably going to be our house we're going to hunker down in for some time. So if we're going to be here for some time, let's make sure that it's great. Let's make sure when we're moving in that there's not going to be a roof leak. Let's make sure when we're moving in there's no termites. Let me make sure that all of these little items are fixed because I'm going to be here for some time. So that's the market that we're dealing with. So it's not unusual to see, it go to 2 pages and you see all of these listed. I'm like, oh my God, right? You go over with your seller, like, geez, it goes to page 2, the overflow text is the worst because you're like, Jesus. But anyways, okay, so this is request for repairs, fully filled out here. Contingency removal, if you mark it here, you can put buyer removes all contingencies. We're good to go. Just give us our, $15,000 credit and that's it, right? Like give us our credit and then we're good to go. We're good to move forward. All right. So if there was a partial, okay, so if seller was like, you know what, we'll give you the credit, but we're not going to do section 1, then you could write that there. So if you have the listing on this one, you're like, except seller will not complete section 1 clearance. Let's put provide. Okay. So if it was partial, okay, or the seller can say, look, we're going to just credit you whatever, $5,000. You do all of that carpet work or touch up paint, whatever you need, we'll credit you at the close of escrow. So that would be the response here. And then if you have the listing, you'd have the seller sign here, whatever they agree to. Or they can respond back. Seller responds to buyer's request for repairs, and then that would be the response to request for repairs. And so it's not uncommon either that they go back and forth. What I like to do when it's kind of a long laundry list and what's kind of customary, depending on the agents, you can make a phone call. I'm like, hey, my seller, they're willing to do you talk to your client first and then, make a call to the agent. Hey, look, what do you think about how can we negotiate? So you do a little bit of a verbal negotiation, and then you can formalize it in writing. Like, okay, yes, they'll do a credit. You go back and forth. That way, it's not forms back and forth and back and forth. Depending on the rapport that you have with the agent, and how those conversations go. Like, hey, I had one on one of my listings, and I got a laundry list, right? And I'm like, she's not going to fix this. She'll fix this, after having a discussion with her. And so we had a verbal discussion and formalized it in writing with a request for repairs. And so that's a kind of an easier way to do it. Again, you can send back and forth as many as you want. If you don't do it that way, or if you don't want to make the calls, or the agent might not be great at communicating, and you might feel like, hey, I need to put every single thing in writing because I don't know about these conversation with these agents. Again, that's up to the agent, kind of dependent on your style of doing it. I like a phone call, old school phone call of like, hey, let's see how we can get a win-win for everybody and do what's fair and like see where we're at. Okay, so that is the response, the seller's response to the request for repairs. We went over non-contingent offers. All right. This TDS I added in here. There's two main forms that the seller actually fills out. It's the TDS and the SPQ. Those are the ones that come up when somebody sues someone. Those are the forms that come up whenever there's an issue. They're going to ask us for those two forms, TDS and SPQ. I think it's important to note, please do not fill this out for your client. Do not. This is like a big like if you take anything away from this, and if you didn't know this already, do not even kind of fill this out for your client. I know that there's so many disclosures and it's hard sometimes, and maybe they're not savvy, maybe they don't have older and don't have aren't internet savvy. They have to fill it out. We can help and clarify. They're like, what's 220? Then you can clarify, okay, here is what 220 is. Here's typically where it's located. But you can't say, yep, you do. You have 220 hookups in your laundry room. So, and I'm going to mark it. And your roof is this years old. You can't do that. So, again, like I said, you can give information based on like, what's a quick release mechanism on the bedroom? Okay, do you have locks on your no? Do you have bars on your window? No. Okay, that probably won't apply. Oh, okay, right. But aside from that, don't fill it out. Because these are the things that they are going to look at, and this is important. So going back to the non-contingent offer, make sure that this is provided if you have a listing and you're accepting a non-contingent offer. Okay. What we do want to do is if there's something that that we know is true about the property and it is unmarked, you can let the seller know, hey, you do have CC&Rs, right? You have an association. It's not marked. Is there a reason you didn't mark it? Oh, I forgot. Okay, it has to be marked. So you can advise on corrections, obvious corrections of that. Because if they fill this out incorrectly, it can cause issues. If they, HOA, there's no HOA marked. So if there's nothing marked there, then there's going to be an issue if they do have an association. Okay, so you want to make sure that they're filling it out. Review the TDS before you send it to the client, before you send it to the buyer for signature. Review it. So don't just blanketly and blindly think that they filled it out correctly, just to make sure, especially, okay, CC&Rs or like, oh, yep, there was a death in the property and they know about it. They didn't mark it because, they can get, it's a lot sometimes, they're dealing with a lot, and, we're used to all this paperwork and we're used to all these contracts and disclosures, but clients aren't. So they're inundated, and sometimes like click through, yes, no, whatever, and miss something. So just be sure that that it is, if you know something about the property that's very blatant, like like again, like I said, you have the prelim, there's CCNRs and association is mark no, then things like that, you can say, hey, make this change. But if they're like, room additions, nope. You can say, hey, you told me in our, our initial listing appointment, our initial walkthrough that you did an ad. Well, I don't want to tell them. Okay, well, that's fraud, right? So, yeah, you let them know things like that, right? Danny, yeah, got your hand up.
So, would you recommend one of the old habits that I had was that I would always just print the SPQ and the TDS, and when I would go to complete my ad bid, once I took the listing and we're prepping, I actually would explain to them what it is, and then I would leave a printed copy versus do an electronic sign. I just kind of found that a little bit more or less overwhelming for
Yeah,
them. How do you
yeah.
feel about that
I think
versus
it's
all the
great.
electronic?
I prefer handwritten over I mean that's my preference, but again I'm old school too, so I mean this is they didn't there was I'm born before the DocuSign era, so there was no electronic signature, so we really had to um we didn't have a choice. And so I give my client the option. I'm like, we can meet in person for disclosures. We can do a Zoom call or call me when you're going over them. I feel more comfortable when I go over them with them in person because I know their feedback, their understanding, their comprehension. Hey, yes, I understand this. No, I don't understand this. What is this? I personally I do, but consumers are so used to the quick,
Right.
people don't. I'm like, okay, call me, let's do a Zoom, let's go over them. No, like I'll just get it back. Glide, it was complete. I'm like, okay, I guess you didn't have any questions about it. And some are really thorough, so I'm like, oh, okay, I'm impressed. Like they knew, they went over it and they were pretty detailed about it. But I mean, yeah, that would be number one preference, yes, would be go over it in person, have them fill it out. You're there to, again, for clarifying purposes and advising them not what to put, but how to put things. Yeah, I mean, if you can, like,
Cool.
great.
That's always worked for us, so thank you.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Okay. Um, does anyone have questions on the TDS while we're here? I don't want to navigate too far away from it, but does anyone have questions while we're on this page about the TDS? Okay. All right. What else did we have? SPQ. Okay, SPQ is the other detailed form here. So, um, at the top, form's not a substitute for the TDS. It's used by the seller to provide additional information when a TDS is completed. If sellers exempt from completing TDS, sellers should complete an exempt seller disclosure. So if it's in a trust and they don't have any knowledge about the property, they're not required to provide a TDS. But other than that, they're not exempt, right? So that's the one exception of exemptions for the TDS when a TDS is not required. Um, if it's a duplex or triplex, then you have to fill out separate property questionnaires for each unit. So, property questionnaire, and it is for unit, let's say unit one or unit A, unit B, whatever it is, you have to specify here. I've seen it where it's a duplex and they have one like SPQ. I'm like, well, wait a minute, we need to know information about each particular property because one could be totally renovated and updated and the other could have burned down last year, right? Like they're two separate entities, even though it's one property, one sale. There's different things going on in each one, so they have to be separate. Yeah, I've received like one on a triplex. I'm like, this is I need more. I need two more. Okay. This is I do like the SPQ because it goes into more detail than the TDS. The TDS is like what's in the property, and then this is gets a little bit more detailed. I do like the structure of it too. So, statutory or contractually required by the seller. So that's any statutes here, anything affecting the property. So these are all like laws and statutes is what this covers. And so anytime there's a new law or statute that's passed, it would go in here. So controlled substance issues. I know like we had the these here, the plumbing fixture here. So this is a newer one. So this was added on, within the last decade. So everything gets updated anytime there's a newer law or statute passed is right here. Any repairs or alterations of the property here, structural systems and appliances. And it says, are you the seller aware of? Well, aware of, because if they're not aware of something, the seller doesn't, it's not their responsibility or their obligation to go in and perform extra research on any items. It's what they currently know. So they're selling their property. What do they know and are they aware of about the property at the time that they're listing it? So they're not required to know things that might be something that's known, but they just don't know about it at the time. So disaster relief or insurance settlements here, water related issues, pets and animals. If there's any pets or animals on the property is kind of a big one. Boundary access and property use by others. So if there's an issue here with the neighbor, we have one right now where somebody can't get access because it's a shared private road and going back and forth. If there were an issue, they need to put that here, right? So they're fighting with the neighbor about a private access road. The guy is like blocking it. They can't do open houses, etc. This needs to be disclosed because there's a kind of a hostile neighbor, right? With limiting access to the property. That's significant because if it sells, so a buyer views it online, they buy the property, it closes, right? And then there's a hostile neighbor that you can't even get access. You're moving, your buyer shows up on moving day. They're trying to get their U-Haul in, and the neighbor's like, there's a dispute over this road. Guess what? They're going to say, no one ever told me that. And they're going to look at the SPQ and say, oh, nobody told me that. Agent, you didn't tell me that. Seller, you didn't tell me that you're fighting with the neighbor about this. So those are the things that have to be disclosed here. Common area, this too. Okay, so I'm going to put an email out here coming up because we've had this come up quite a bit, but while you guys are on here, I'll just give it to you here. So there's the law that passed 2025. It's SB 326. That has to do with the wood destroy or with the wood destroy. I'm on that with the wood balcony disclosure for associations. Okay, so homeowners associations, not homeowners, not sellers. So there's a distinction there. Homeowner association, the HOA, a law requires specifically to HOA that they have to inspect any elevated wood balconies. Okay, so that passed January 2025. It had to have been done. The inspections are very costly. They're about 30 grand or more, plus repairs that need to be done. Okay, with that being said, there are some associations that are saying that the balconies belong to the homeowner. So if it belongs to the homeowner, then the HOA is exempt. So they're using this legal loophole to not have the inspections done. So they're saying, nope, we're exempt, which I talked to an attorney at Carr and they said it's like a legal nightmare right now because there's HOA attorneys that are fighting this law. So they're using that loophole. So what you need to do is write in here or have your clients write in, okay, that HOA has indicated they are exempt from SB 326 because sellers are not required. Your seller's not required to do the inspection. There's no requirement. It's a law specifically to the association. And so the seller's not liable for it. So if you sell a property and you have a wood balcony, but you had no inspection done, well, they're very costly. And it's also not on the seller to have those repairs done. The law doesn't apply to them. It applies to the association. So, Arthur, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh,
Go ahead. What am I doing?
so I don't know if she can hear you. Okay, so my question is what box is it to be checked and the explanation?
So you would mark, hold on, I think I muted. I don't know what I did, guys. I'm clicking all over here. Hold on. Okay, the box here. So you would mark, you could put here, let me see. Um,
Probably 14E maybe.
yeah, I would put E,
Okay.
and then you could mark in here the explanation. And that
Okay.
explanation is exactly what I said. The seller has indicated that HOA is exempt from SB 326.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. All right. Arthur, you had a question?
Sorry, I fixed my sound thing, but it was the same
Okay.
question Danny was asking where the
Okay.
explanation would go.
All right. No problem. Yeah, and I'm going to send an email out because it keeps it's come up twice now in this past week. And yeah, I talked to the attorney at Carr, and she's like, yeah, their HOA attorneys are like having a field day with this, and they're like, no, we're exempt. It's on the lot. And I'm like, the first time I got it, the issue, I'm like, no, they're wrong. Like HOA is wrong. They're misinformed. And I'm like, well, let me see. Let me look at the list. And I'm like, no, they're clearly attached. I mean, it's not like, I'm like, she's like, well, it is a townhome. And I look at the aerial view. I'm like, no, they're in line. Like they're all attached and they all have very uniform balconies that are wood. And yeah, they're saying that, the balcony belongs to the homeowner because it's on their parcel, it's owned by them. So there's this loophole that they're using. And in the first one, that particular one, the homeowner was happy. He's like, yeah, it's like 30 grand. We don't have to pay it. I'm like, well, someone's gonna have to pay it. Like it's not you should split it. You should have the HOA do it and split it up because it's going to be a bigger, more costly issue later on if they determine that, you know what, actually you do need to provide it. So this takes the obligation off the seller because it's not up to the seller. Sellers don't have to have inspections done. So it's not a seller, it's not like the law passed, that new statute that said sellers have to provide this because regular single family homeowner, you don't have to provide a balcony inspection. It was to obligate the HOA and to have the associations take care of this because if one has an issue, it's likely that other ones have a structural issue. So we have to get that fixed. And so, yeah. So if you run into that, that is the reasoning. If a HOA says, no, we don't have to, and you think they're crazy, they are, but yeah, it's a thing. So she said it's like a legal nightmare right now with fighting over with HOA attorneys are having just a field day with this one. So okay. Um, let's see. Um, yeah, if there were any title ownership liens or legal claims, yeah, I was thinking in my mind if I wanted the HOA thing to go down here, but it needs to go here. It has to go in the HOA common area issue there. All right. So, material facts. Any past or present no material facts or significant items affecting the value or desirability of the property. This would be, so if you have everything disclosed here, so you're thinking like, what's a material fact? What else? Is there something that's not already listed? I'll give an example. So I had a listing prior and there were multiple deaths on the property. There were 11 total. Um, and it was like in the news, it was kind of a thing. Yeah. And they were not natural causes. So is it a material fact? Well, it was longer than 3 years ago. So deaths on the property, they only need to be disclosed within the past 3 years. It was longer than that. So does it need to be disclosed? A material fact. What do you guys think?
I would say yes, even though the rule says 3 years, because people can Google, they can research, and they're going to know regardless. And then you look like the person that's lying if you don't disclose.
Yeah. So it could go either way, but you want it to it is I would say it's a material fact, right? It's something that, hey, it's not one, it's not two, it's not three, it's a lot. And then it was, it was an older case. So it happened, I think in the 70s. It was an old, but it's still there, right? Multiple things happen multiple times within the property. So I would say, you don't want to get halfway through the transaction or get down to close of escrow and like, wait a minute. I was Googled my new address and lo and behold, this article popped up and it was, something significant. So yeah, so material facts of something like that that doesn't quite fit in anywhere because you're right. It doesn't, we don't have to by law. It's not the 3-year mark. You don't have to disclose it. But is it material? Probably. Would an objective person think that that would be a lot? The homeowners didn't care, right? Like it didn't bother them. But,
I mean, I have worked with some buyers that's a big no-no for them, of course, some people.
yeah.
And like my first question would be like, are there ghosts?
And it was like an eerie feeling there, not gonna lie. But yeah, it was interesting. But I don't know if it was eerie because I knew going into it that it had a history. But yeah, kind of interesting story there. So yeah, so
One of
material.
the things I like to tell the sellers is if you're asking me, then yes, disclose. And
Yeah.
secondly, if this is something that your neighbor fully knows about, then the new owners are going to fully know
Yeah.
about it. So just disclose it and avoid a headache down the road is how I like to put that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so I would anything miscellaneous, interesting stuff would go there. Okay. That is, oh, okay. Do I want to go cancellation? All right, we'll touch quickly because we have about 10 minutes left. We'll touch real quickly on cancellation contract. Because that does tie into contingency removal, all of that. So this little box is popped up here. Can you guys see this box? I don't know how to close this out.
I just see your forms.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. I had a little thing that popped up. Okay. All right. Cancellation contract. Disposition of deposit, cancellation of escrow. All right, so we got our buyer. It's our buyer. They want to seller didn't agree to request for repair, so we wanted all those things, and the seller's like, you know what, I'm actually gonna keep the house, right? Like, forget it, I'm not doing any repairs. Buyer's like, hey, well, I'm not gonna buy it if you don't give me 15 grand, so we're done. Okay. If it's a mutual cancellation where it can't be a meeting of the minds, then you could put that it is a mutual cancellation. Okay, so that's a scenario where it's mutual. It's like, you know what, we want this. Nope, we're not going to fix it. Okay, all right, let's cancel. So this is the buyer has not removed any of their contingencies because we were waiting on the request for repairs. They didn't agree. So mutual cancellation. And then we're going to go here and we're going to ask that they do a full release of the deposit. Okay, so escrow number, okay, with, let's see, Old Republic. So full release, and we want our deposit back. Then they would sign, seller signs, all good. We just, thanks, but we couldn't agree. It wasn't for us. Sorry. Here's your deposit back. Okay, bye. That's the perfect cancellation scenario, right? So buyer seller didn't have a meeting of the minds. They couldn't fully agree contractually. They want to move forward separately. That's what that looks like. Now, what happens if the buyer has removed all contingencies and now they want to cancel? Do you think, okay, here's a question. Is the buyer, after they've removed all contingencies, entitled to their deposit back?
Nope.
Correct. They're not. They are not. So if your buyer has fully performed, you're 1 week away from closing escrow, and they're like, you know what, Arthur, I saw a house down the street and I want that one more because it has a bigger closet, and we're going to cancel this one. It's only $1,000 earnest money. We're just going to jump ship over here. And we'll get our deposit back. Let's get that 1,000. We'll put it on this one, right? You can't.
Nope.
Because here's why. The buyer has wasted that time, that is like precious time that it has been sellers paying expenses. They're maybe waiting on the funds to purchase a replacement property. They're paying their mortgage, property taxes because they've given the buyer that much time in order to see if they want to move forward contractually. So it is time. So in exchange for that, they get to keep the deposit. That is their, their loss of the time. They keep their deposit and then, okay, put it back on the market. Now, if buyers sometimes will try to use loopholes. Okay. Um, I I'm really reluctant to I know some people do, but if my buyer just doesn't want the property, I don't really try to find loopholes to get them out that aren't true, right? Because this is a good faith contract. So we're supposed to act in good faith. And so you're like, you know what, actually, they didn't send us this so we can get out of the contract. I don't really like to advise that way because it's, yes, technically it's we can do that, right? So say if our buyer hadn't removed our loan contingency, but she just changed her mind and wants to buy a house down the street, we can say, okay, she didn't qualify for the loan, right? It falls into that gray area. I won't do it. I'll say, look, here's you can't, right? You're going to lose your deposit. However, you need to seek legal counsel, like it states here, if you have a dispute about that, right? So we can't really advise them any further than that, other than, and I know agents that do it. They'll say, you know what, actually, we left in the appraisal contingency. If you want to go get the house down the street, we'll cancel based on the appraisal and let's just go find another house. It's not really acting within the scope of the good faith. But again, every agent is different. I mean, somebody's perspective might be, I am acting in my buyer's good faith because I'm finding a loophole, because I'm getting them out of the contract. Okay. I don't really like to give buyers to use loopholes or ways out, like if it's not honest. So again, my kind of perspective, no one's really going to know, right? Like no one's real there. They could, but if they put here that they're canceling because they have health issues and they really don't, but they've removed all contingencies except for maybe the loan contingency, that's where it gets tricky because that's not using any loophole, right? You can't cancel based on that. And so then the deposit would go to the seller because there's not another valid reason why they're getting out of the contract. So yeah, so it gets a little bit tricky. I've had I'll touch on this because we had this happen with one of the agents, not our agent. I always like when we're on the other side, when we're not the bad ones, right? When we're not the naughty ones, when it's the other, it's the other side. But what happened is they sent over the TDS, our agent did, and 10 days later, the buyer's agent had the buyer sign the disclosures. So then the buyer wanted to cancel, and the buyer said, you didn't give it to us until this date. And we're like, guys, the delivery date is agent to agent. If something's delivered to you in your possession, it is considered that your buyer has it. Okay. So those timeframes don't apply. The buyer saying, well, I didn't get it until the 13th. Well, we sent it on the 3rd. So delivery is effective on the 3rd, not the 13th. And guess what? Your window just expired within that time frame. So we're keeping your deposit. Take it up with your agent of why there was a 10-day delay in delivery time frame between, and I know that, right? We're getting all disclosures. Your TC doesn't want to send piece by piece. I get it. But be sure that you have that when you have them in your possession, treat them like, hotcakes, like they got to go. So have your TC send them out as quick as possible, because if there's something in that, right? And we have 5 days to review. Well, guess what? You check down you wind that clock down, that puts your client at risk if you're not 10 days is a 10 days is a long time. Like I get 3 days. Okay. TC, she's getting all the other disclosures to send one packet. So it's easy and it's clean and you're not getting, disclosure here, disclosure there. And it makes it, a little easier for everyone. But treat those like they are like hot news and they need to go quickly because something like that could happen. It wasn't us, thankfully. But it could be, it could be. It's like, man, I got like, when we get so many deals going and we're out this buyer, this seller, this closing, we have a listing appointment, be sure that you're on it with those time frames because they are important. And that is like the buyer and seller, that's their whole world at that moment. They're selling a house or they're buying. Like we have to remember to treat them like that's their life. They're packing up, they're moving, they could be moving to a new area, starting over. So that's a really big thing that sometimes gets lost in it, but 10 days is like an excessive amount of time to not have done something or taken that action on. So just be sure, don't be a 10-dayer because you can get yourself into trouble. So it's 1 o'clock. So we are finished with the training. Any questions that you guys have? Am I muted? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, it said unmute myself, little thing popped up. Any questions that anyone has? Let me know. If you guys have to hop off, feel free to hop off.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
All right, guys, thank you. Go get some listings.
Bye. Thank you.